because could we do another brief or quick introductions here? Bill Tracy Sr. from Point Lay, and Eddie and Jimmy. Thank you. Okay. Just yeah, if we could hear about what your work is or your capacity in which you're speaking on this panel today. Oh yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Eddie from Wainwright, and I'm going to talk about a bit about our erosion going on in Wainwright. And I've got how many 4 pictures, I think. So not yet. Okay. And I was born, right by the beach. My parents used to go pitch a tent right by the beach, by the ocean. And where I was born, that beach all gone about maybe 30 feet away further into Wainwright. And another thing, that storm came on the last year, that sewage line is getting, we're going to probably cut that sewage line another storm comes in. And there's a service barrel right near there. And there was some engineer who wants to help us a long time ago. They tried to use sandbag, and those sandbags didn't work. Then they start using like those empty old tanks. They tried that and they never worked them together. And when the storm came in, they all broke apart and eroded our beach. Then they started some kind of sand dune like they use in Iraq when they're having war. What we first started. Things going to do that? Yeah. Okay. Mother well to our leaders presentation. This one here, what he wrote. And here is a lagoon. You see this permafrost right here? When it melts, the tundra is go down. Just another slide, please. You see, all this thunder was up here, and when the permafrost melt, the ice, when the ice melt, the thunder fell. It's all over here. That's in our lagoon. That's not the ocean part. And there's our where it's fall down all the way over here, all the way up. It's the tundra is getting eaten up all when it's get warm. See another slide. There's that ice right here. When I bet you if this would melt, it's gonna go down here. That the tundra is already gone. It wasn't like this last year. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you for these photos as well. You kind of got into the first question, and I'll pass the mic to Jimmy next and to Bill. But this is a great description of the most critical challenges that are facing your community. So from each of your perspectives, I'd like to hear what that looks like as well.
The beach erosion is worse than this. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Jimmy. Is that better? Okay. My name is Jimmy Cobb. I'm the acting mayor for Wainwright, and I've been city council member for going on 5 years. And during those 5 years, we've had severe storms that highly impacted the erosion. Part of what you're seeing here, this picture represents just a little bit percentage of what you're going to see if you go to Wainwright. And up and down the coast, all up and down the coast up here is during those 5 years I've been with the city council, I've had to run as part of my other job with the fire department with the local emergency planning committee. During those storms, we've had to had people employed temporarily or full-time to beach watch, and that's to keep people away from the beaches, which in a storm like we had last year, all you do is get caught in the undercurrent and you're gone. And I'm not going to risk my staff or my volunteers to do a surface rescue. You make that choice to go. See, harsh but true. Is I'm not going to risk anybody else trying to save somebody that had a bad idea. Is as for some of the infrastructure that we've been talking about, when we had our first severe storm that impacted our shoreline and started eroding real bad. As some of you, I think, you were just starting with a borer then, I think. And that that green box-like wire mesh wall that you had a picture of with the sandbags in front, that was after one storm. The borough spent X amount of dollars to have that, and in 24 hours, half of that fell in. And I was the IC for that, and we watched it fall. And it's like, there goes X amount of dollars. And so we initially, when we were looking to reinforce our shoreline, we wanted rock. Powers that be said different. 10 years later, we got rock. It's holding up pretty good. I mean, it is. It protected that area of shoreline that was filled with rock, and it did its job. And the unprotected shoreline on the south side of town was wiped out, and there was a lot of erosion. As an old ice cellar was cracked open, and imagine being under the ice, frozen, rotting, and you get a whiff of that. Oh man, make it green. There's But with the storms getting more and more severe, as we saw it here, we often see it here, is the lagoon being filled up. As last year, our lagoon filled up. And in my lifetime, I'm 58, I've never seen that happen. And it filled up the lagoon. There was a tidal surge of 6 feet, if I remember correctly, and caused a lot of erosion. It changed a place we call Thomas Point at the mouth of our river. And that one storm changed the entire beach area. it drained a lake, a saltwater lake that was there as long as I can remember. I used to swim in it. And now it's gone. And we need to protect our shorelines, especially around our towns. There's Eddie touched up on how we it was some of that area was taken out as maybe another good storm or two will expose the sewer line, the water line. As what it's, I'll give you a perfect example. In 1972, 7 years old, I'm sliding down a bluff, wintertime, and 75 feet. 75 feet going down. I'm sliding down wintertime. Somewhere 73 or 74, somewhere around there, we lose 20 feet of that bluff due to the storms. Several years later, we had to move houses, and my house I live in was one of those. So it's through the years it's gone by. We've lost about 75 feet of bluff in town area, and the area we're protected with rock was a major portion of that. So rock works, other stuff works in different areas, but like everywhere else, funding. Well, we need the funding. And I believe that's all I have to say. If you're coming to Wainwright, as we get there, you'll see what we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy and Eddie, for those vivid descriptions of the scale and the scope of the impacts you're seeing. I've heard Bill mention pretty movingly before too, in his capacity as an assembly member and the previous board chair for TNHA, some of what Point Lay is dealing with as well. So I'll next pass it on to him and ask him to describe some of those critical challenges there.
Thank you. And Jimmy's never, that's all I gotta say. He'll talk for the rest of the day if you let him. So Bill Tracy Sr. here. I'm a longtime resident of Point Lay. The opportunity to work at Denali Park when I first came to Alaska. I spent my second winter in Point Hope building teacher houses. And I got in trouble because they were putting the plumbing in the outside walls, and I made a change order, which was very expensive. We built plenums under the house, put all the plumbing in there. It was heated. It worked. Then I was invited to Point Lay to help people move. ANSCA just became law back then, and people had the opportunity to move back to their home communities. And Nixit was big time. They moved back, even though they were living in tents. Point Lay was big because there was only one family in Point Lay throughout the 60s, and that was my wife's family. Everybody else left because the big reason was the BIA pulled the students out and put them in boarding schools. So the parents moved closer to their kids. Some in Barrow, some went to Wainwright, some went to Fairbanks and Anchorage and so forth. But Marie's parents stayed because her dad got to work at the Dew Line. So he had employment and he stayed on the Barrier Island Village. When ANSCA became law, people were moving back. The borough was just formed, and the borough, because the original Point Lay was on a barrier island, it was a flood zone. So the borough wasn't going to build or invest in infrastructure in a flood zone. So we had to pick a new location, and that was up one of our local rivers. It's all about the water there. So if we're on the river, we have access to the lagoon. When we're in the lagoon, we have access to the ocean, and the ocean is our garden. That's where most of our food comes from, a big portion of it. And it helps to be on the river because the caribou, during their insect relief migrations, they're on the river bluffs and the lagoon bluffs. So it's all about the water. So we moved up and started building a new Point Lay on a small island, but it turned out to be too small for a runway, too wet for roads, and it needed a bridge to the mainland to get to the Air Force runway. Well, at that time, 1980, the Air Force released half of their land, and it was on a big bluff, and it was near the runway, and it was already one road. So we jumped at the chance to move there. Of course, the first few of us, we had some BIA self-help homes back then, and a few of us didn't have any heavy equipment. We were building our homes by hand, hand dug pilings. They were very shallow, and of course it was a V-shaped trench, so it was kind of shaky. But when we got the money to relocate the village on the island, we had augers and cats, and everything was a winter operation. We jacked up the homes that we built and skidded them over. It took us 2 years. In the meantime, we were accessing gravel from sandbars and doing a little bit of site preparation, putting in roads. The North Shore Borough had a $400 million capital improvements program back then, and they built in all 8 communities, fire stations, clinics, schools, power plants, public works buildings, roads. It was, we didn't get the luxury of doing one village and see how that type of construction does for the next village, do some corrections. It was all done at once. We're all on stilts. We're on, and some of the buildings are on pads. Then the thermal siphons came in, but if there was a mistake with the type of construction we used in one community, it was amplified by all 8. So we're going from the early 1970s right up into the 80s when we had that big capital improvement program. We're building all these things, employing a lot of local people, but we're also getting engineering from beyond the North Slope. And rather than including traditional knowledge with some of that engineering, it was just straightforward engineering. Some of the engineers didn't even come to Point Lay or to our villages. It was all done on paper, and everything looked great on paper. But my dad told the mayor that if you're going to be burying anything like water, sewer, direct bury in the ground, it's not going to work. Because what we had seen, the Air Force was there before we moved to the community, and we noticed that anything they buried, they had landfills everywhere. Everything they buried was coming up, whether they buried towers or caterpillars or pickup trucks or beer cans. It was all exposing after time. And Warren, my father-in-law, saw that, and so he gave us a big warning that anything you bury is not going to work for a very long period of time. And he was right. Our direct bury water sewer is being trashed. It's being abandoned, and we're going to holding tanks. We spent millions of dollars on that infrastructure, and we learned a lesson. It was an expensive lesson. So we use holding tanks for our water. We have a seasonal fill, and Mother Nature is a big deal up here. Everything's about Mother Nature. You're fighting Mother Nature with the type of construction we're doing. We're creating snowdrifts, and those snowdrifts are creating ponds, and those ponds are causing subsidence. One of our water holding tanks, a 1 million gallon water holding tank, had some severe subsidence under it and around it, and the floor gave way, and we lost that tank. It was in the middle of the winter, and we had 1 million gallons of water that almost flooded out the new itinerant quarters that Borough had just built. And it was vital to have that third water holding tank because we had just through erosion and subsidence, we just lost our freshwater lake. It drained into the river, lost a lot of riverbank. And when it drained, we started seeing debris. We saw oil drums, Caterpillar tracks, galvanized piping, truck parts. We found out that the Air Force was dropping a lot of metal items into our lake. And it still remains there today. It has to be cleaned up, but I don't think we'll ever get to use that lake again. We're losing too much of that riverbank, and it was a shallow lake. So we're using the river. The problem with the river is it's got saline, so we're using an expensive reverse osmosis to clean up our water. But the river is where we used to dredge the gravel. And now that we're using it for a water source, the two don't mix. There'll be way too much silt. With all the subsidence going on where we are, it seems to be an ice-rich, ice wedge area. The ground is subsiding, and our pilings were 10 to 12 feet deep. And that's how much the ground has dropped in some areas. And whole pilings are being exposed now, and houses are shifting. Doors don't work, windows are cracking, walls are cracked. And then, of course, 20 homes, well, no, half that. We moved, when we relocated the village, we moved 16 homes, a school, a store, a power plant. We moved them across the ice, and those homes went through the shock of being relocated. And now they're going through a second shock of shifting and losing its foundation. So a lot of our homes really are damaged so bad that they're not really worth rebuilding or remodeling. The whole foundation in the home just needs to be discarded and restart again. Some of the fixes we're looking at is of course, deep gravel and longer pilings, and a really good means of moving water out of the community during spring breakup. And that was another thing I wanted to mention, was that if the engineering is right, then you have to really watch the contractors, because when they put in our water sewer, they used their ditch witch and went right down the road, cutting all our drainage tubes, our culverts. They put in, backfilled, and did a really good job of putting the direct buried pipes in the ground and covering it back. They cut culverts. And next spring, all that breakup water went down into the trench, undermined the gravity flow sewage line, and it made a roller coaster out of the pipe underground, and sewage don't flow uphill. So right off day one, we were in trouble because we didn't follow the contractors. And little things like that cost millions of dollars to repair. And we've been repairing the water sewer lines ever since. And the good thing, all the tailings that come out of the trench to do the repair get to cover our landfill. That's about it. We're running out of gravel. We can't dredge the river. Unless after we do a seasonal fill up, we get the dredge, but we don't have the dredges anymore. So here we are today with a lot of damaged infrastructure, mostly foundations, but without a good foundation, you don't have a good home. TNHA has come in and they've tried various types of foundations. Some work, some don't. we can make anything work, I guess, if we just keep at it, keep the maintenance, but that gets spendy and. But that's where we're at today. We've got a lot of subsidence, a lot of ponding in the village. Water's getting stagnant. We're having to fence around some of these ponds to keep the kids out. Just like Wainwright, our bluff was 40 feet above sea level, and now we're closer to 30. A lot of sloughing going on, and when that slough gets away from the bank, we're grabbing it and using it to fill in our grave sites, because most of the material we pull out of our grave when we're digging it is just ice. It melts, and you got to put gravel in there. The gravel grabs that sunshine and sinks, so we're putting sod back in there, and that's helping the graves. So there we go.
Thank you, Bill, and thank all of you gentlemen. You're both involved in government, Bill and Jimmy in municipal government, Eddie and tribal government. I'm curious, and Jimmy, you're the executive, you're the acting mayor currently for your city, right? So from that perspective, what climate adaptations and mitigations are being considered and planned to your communities responding to these impacts you've just described?
I think one of the biggest things that we are looking for is funding. We know what we want. We know what we need done. We just need the funding to do it. And that is probably one of the biggest barriers we have. And if I remember correctly, there's certain laws that people come up with is hinders some of that progress, if I'm correct. You know, right? Is and it's an uphill battle for us to get things done. Everything is brought in, and it takes work in a difficult environment to get stuff done. Is even in the fire service, there is we don't have a training budget anymore because it's all going elsewhere. And it impacts my crew, impacts the village and how we respond to emergencies. But any given day, any given moment, those tones go off, we're there. And I wish it was like that with funding, but it's not. It's an uphill battle. We gotta fight for what we want. And we're competing with the whole state practically to get what we want, and it's an uphill battle. I'm learning about it, and it's already giving me a headache just talking about it.
Like my budget. Oh, God, when about the house in Wainwright, one of them going to be demolished, and there's my aunt's house going down too. It's getting off level from the permafrost. And we're looking for funding. So like my brother said, funding is hard to get, you know. From big, you don't write a grant, right? And what kind of data you're like, and then got city one, and I got Leach of Wainwright. So we're getting some kind of grant we get. Sometimes we don't get them, you know. So grants is what we need to all our villages. And thank you.
So, I sit on the Russell Borough Assembly, so we have 8 communities that we have to deal with. I represent Point Lay and Utiqiagvik on my seat, but of course, as an assembly person, it's all 8 communities. So when we have annual capital improvement, we get at times $500 million worth of requests from each community, from all the communities combined. And we have to whittle that down to the amount that we are able to bond, 70 million up to 100 million. A lot of it goes towards water sewer repair and some new installation. But as I mentioned earlier, all our infrastructure is aging and it's all of similar age. And a lot of our money is going to repair that, major repair and remodeling. Every few years, it's a lot of money goes towards a village's school. We had a fire and we lost a school in Utiqiagvik. We had a fire and lost public works building in Utiqiagvik Pass. Insurance money is really slow to come, so those are considerations. We got to get those schools built. We got to get the heavy equipment back in a shelter, or it just ages fast. We got a big project in Wainwright right now, underwater sewer. A lot of the communities have reached capacity in their sewer plants, so those plants need to be added to, or we can't hook up new homes. It's hard to maintain the homes that we already have feeding these systems. So there's just a lot of consideration and not a lot of money. So the mayor every year has help with a PRC panel of folks from various parts of the slope. And that's a project recommendation committee. And they're the ones that get to whittle down that $500 million request down to 100 million. And the years that we only have the 70 million, we're not buying any new equipment those years. We're not buying any vehicle those years. It's just going towards major repair, replacement. Our search and rescue is pretty spendy. We bought helicopters and fixed wing, and so that money just doesn't go as far. It sounds like a lot of money, but it just doesn't go as far as you'd hope. So when it comes to this this newer problem with subsidence, erosion, private homes that need tending to, driveways, those aren't borough responsibilities, but the borough's one of the front runners to find ways to, if not repair it outright, a Band-Aid until we can find the funding to do that work. And smaller villages like Point Lay, we just don't have the capacity to look for grants and administer grants. So capacity in our village settings is a big deal. And I think that would be one of the areas that help would be welcomed. Grant writers, engineers come in and assess so that we know what we've got, and from there we can come up with a plan. So yeah, fixing somebody's window, fixing somebody's door is an immediate fix, but fixing the house because the foundation is rotten is a big consideration. You can do all you want with the house, but if you got a bad foundation, I think that's where we need to start. I see a lot of people in this room that's right up your alley. So I'm excited with the outcome of this particular meeting, and this isn't the only time that we meet. So Jana and her crew have been working in Point Lay and Wainwright for a couple of years now, and BIA is involved with our communities. The help is coming. And Mother Nature is gonna do what she does, and patience is a virtue, and I think we have a lot of that up here. It's just that you go bathing in basins, sponge bathing, and you have an indoor outhouse using a bucket. You go from that just 20, 30 years ago. You get direct bury water sewer, billions of dollars worth of infrastructure. You got flush toilets now, you got running water, hot running water, and all of a sudden you're taking off the utility and you're back to 30-gallon water holding tanks in your house and basins. There goes your showers until we can figure something out. And we're building pumping systems in people's homes now. But we used to have home sprinklers in for several years back. We had home fire sprinklers in our homes. And that meant we had an extra 100-gallon water holding tank. But that funding went away, and people would see 100 gallons of water for a sprinkler and their house is out of water. So they pull that sprinkler pump out and they start using that water. So that was a good idea that just didn't pan out. But we're open to try a lot of things, and I'm really excited about some of the ideas that PNH is coming up, PNHA is coming up with working with the cold climate folks and them, those kind of people. So we're ready and eager and in need of some fixes now. Thank you.
Bill, your comments about this conference are such a great segue into the final question I wanted to ask you all. And you've done an excellent job of describing the lived daily reality. You're dealing with insurance, you're dealing with bonding, you're dealing with grant writing and capacity challenges, right? So you've got 40 or 50 of the most concerned and qualified members of the scientific and engineering community gathered here today, and then a broader sphere of influence, of course, through everyone's colleagues. What's one message you would like to get out into that sphere of influence today about what's helpful and useful to your communities going forward?
I would like to see another rock wall on our south side of our town, but that rock work is been wasting a lot of money trying to use sand, bags, and old fuel tanks. And they never get them, weld them together, that's why they all got and that all those tanks are right on the south side of Wainwright, and you would see them there, they're all rusted out. And I would like somebody to help me write a grant and get that rock in front of our town. And he will work and probably will move that one of the house getting close to the beach, or they will move it. That's it.
I think what I would like to see is more of you guys take a first-hand look, not just a date. Is spend time in the villages, get to know who we are, what we do, how we do things. Is work together. That's what we have to do. Is we have to work together. If you're going to say, "Oh, we got to do it this way," and we know that's not working, is guess what? You're going or there's a lot of times where there's, Christmas food, but those suggestions were part of somebody's education. When they should have listened to what we had to say. We live in our villages. We know what's wrong. We know how to fix it. Come work with us. It's that simple. As UAF has a bunch of funding to get this thing going here. There's different entities out there can help us bring you guys into our villages. See what's out there, what works, what doesn't, what we need, how do we get it? That's one thing I want to see before I even retire. And I got like 20 years maybe.
So, thank you, folks. We're neighbors, yet there's no roads connecting us. We think alike, we live alike. But the message I want to get out, there's 8 communities. And each and every one of our communities is unique. Some of us are very windy communities. Some of us are they're warming up in the interior villages. They don't have the ocean front. We've got Utiqiagvik Pass, Nixit, Utiqiagvik, they're inland and in the mountains. Even though we're unique, we're distant, we're not connected by any infrastructure, yet we're all doing the same kind of construction. And I think we need that uniqueness considered in our modeling for our communities, our respective communities. In a windy community, I favor Quonset huts myself. I like the single story. I like double story. I like the way the wind moves out. I look at an automobile and it's designed to work with the wind. An airplane to work with the wind. But our homes, they create drifts, and the drifts create all our headaches with the ponding and the water problems getting down into our pilings. So I think we need to really engineer that type of construction that works with Mother Nature rather than becomes an obstacle. So respect our uniqueness. We've already heard last night with the video that our language varies a little bit, culture varies a little bit. And with all that uniqueness and the distance, we're also a very sharing part of the world. And we just can't wait to get together and share things. Every couple of years, Borough puts on what they call Kivik, where we bring in dancers and drummers and elders into a community, Barrow mostly, and we just celebrate life. And in a sense, we do that every day. I mean, every day is an adventure up here, and we want to keep those adventures safe, healthy, and prosperous. So once again, I really thank you for coming up and listening to us, and we're going to continue this experience, I hope, and come up with solutions. So, thank you.
A round of applause for our experts here. Thank you, Chris. Yeah.